What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 110 of the Freedom to Flourish podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about eosinophilic esophagitis. So, I want everybody who's listening to just sit there and repeat after me. Eosinophilic esophagitis. And now
Wow, it
say it
sounds
10 times
fast.
fast.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Try to say that. What does that even mean, Dr. Joel?
Eosinophilic esophagitis. Well, it's basically, we'll start with esophagitis. So, esophagus is, of course, there in your throat. It's what carries food from your mouth to your stomach. The itis always means inflammation. So, it's inflammation of the esophagus. And the eosinophilic part essentially means there's a condition related to your eosinophils, which are basically the allergy related white blood cells.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't sound as complex as the name would imply. Some sort of allergy causing esophagus inflammation.
Yeah.
Long story short.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all in all, I don't know about you, but I'm seeing this a whole lot more in practice, and that's kind of what inspired the episode today. And hopefully, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think it will be. So let's kind of do this, Dr. Tim. This is something that you've mentioned before, obviously in our conversations, but also on the podcast. This is something that you'd been diagnosed with years ago. This was part of your story and how you got into all things holistic health, and kind of led you to going to chiropractic school and all these good things. And so, Dr. Tim, share with us your experience as far as like, hey, what were you experiencing at first? And then, of course, you're like, hey, this is not normal. Let's go see a doctor. And then just kind of share a little bit of that, but then also maybe take a step back and share with us, like, big picture, that was your experience. So different people can kind of relate with things. But then also big picture, like what's actually going on. We'll get into this together. What's actually going on holistically. And of course, we'll talk about, the drivers and the triggers that cause this, but then also what you can do for it. I have not, unfortunately, like yourself, I haven't seen a ton of cases with EOE. And, as we talk about it, I might pick up on more and start looking for it more and start seeing it more. But I know I had one patient that came in she'd been diagnosed with it, a young girl. And so we had great results. So I can actually walk through some of that case. That might be encouraging for listeners. But Dr. Tim, let's start with this. What was your experience like? What did you feel? What was going on that you're like, hey, I need to go see a doctor? And then what doctor did you see? And we'll just kind of go step by step there.
Yeah. Well, first thing, I'm just surprised that we haven't done this as an episode. I think I've
Yeah.
mentioned that I have this condition quite a few times, but I don't know why we haven't talked about it before in great detail. But with my experience, so ever since I was a little kid, I mean, 5, 6 years old, my parents used to think that I just didn't want to eat what they made for dinner.
Yeah.
So they used to force us to drink milk at dinner. They would give us those like very um, dense, powdery, chalk-like Flintstone multivitamin things
Okay.
that, were more popular back in the day, the chewables that,
Yeah.
supposedly tasted good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those were awful, by the way. And
Okay.
so I remember at dinner, it was Flintstone. It wasn't actually Flintstones. They bought the off-brand to save money, but maybe that was the problem. Maybe that's why they were so gross. But they would give us our multivitamin and they would make us drink milk because, milk does the body good. Build strong bones, got milk, whole thing. And so I hated the taste of both. And so what I would do is I would eat, chew up my multivitamin, get it down, and then I would slam my milk just to be done with it. And then I would eat my dinner. Well, the way that eosinophilic esophagitis works is you kind of get a flooding of these white blood cells to the skin or the epithelium that lines the esophagus. And so you'll get some localized swelling. Well, say it swells like, 100%. Well, over the next couple of days, it'll reduce gradually by like say 10% a day. And so if every day you're having dairy and it swells 100%, and then the next day it's at 90%, and then it swells 100% from there, you're at 190%, and then it goes down to 180, and then it goes up to 280, it's just this constant cycle of the esophagus continuously swelling and not having enough time to let go. And so that's where the problem lies. It's a gradual onset thing, but once the symptoms become really bad, that's where things will almost completely close off. And so that's where some people, they have it really localized in the bottom third of the esophagus. Some people it gets up to the middle third. And in
Okay.
bad cases, it gets all the way up to the top where people actually get like really raspy. They'll get their RFK voice going
Oh, wow.
if they have dairy or whatever allergen is driving it. And
Yep.
so what I would have is, if I started my meal with the milk, I would get swelling. And so if we had, say, steak or chicken or something that was more of like a fibrous meal or meat, things would actually kind of get stuck a little bit. And I was a little
Yep.
kid who couldn't articulate what the heck was going on. And so I'd run to the bathroom and be freaking out like, oh, I'm going to throw up or whatever's going on. And I'd like hold my throat and kind of stomp my feet and freak out. And my parents were just like, he just doesn't want to eat his food. And oh man, I love giving my mom a hard time about that. I'm like, you guys almost killed me when I was a kid. And she's like, stop, I feel bad. And I'm like, I'm just messing with you. We've got a
Yep.
great relationship, so it's not
Yeah.
it's not that serious.
Yeah.
But no, it was a very, I mean, I have vivid memories of that. I mean, once you get older, people are like, I don't remember, an insane amount of good stuff as a kid, like, you do, but the biggest things that strike fear and adrenaline and are like near death, in quotes, near death experiences, that's what, is seared into your brain more. It's a, psychologically proven thing. And I have very vivid memories of things like that happening in great
Yep.
detail because it's
Mm.
scary. I mean, what if something gets stuck and, you choke on it or whatever?
Right.
Um, so anyway, that was the earliest circumstance that I can remember is I was very little. I remember stomping my feet and just freaking out, like, oh my God. But then from there, fast forward, it was always kind of a little bit of a thing. And I remember being in middle school. After school, I'd go to one of my buddies' houses because we had baseball practice. So I'd go home with him on the bus or, go to his house. And then his dad would take us to baseball, and then my parents would pick me up from there. And I remember like him always commenting that I was just burping all the time. Like I could burp like you wouldn't believe. And I was 12, 13 years old, just burping, burping, burping. And that's a huge sign you've got a hiatal hernia issue or just poor digestion in the stomach, low
Mm.
acid, all the things that go along with EOE. And so that's, another thing on top of things getting stuck. And then fast forward to my junior into senior year of high school. So at that point, I was wanting to play football and I was lifting weights like crazy, trying to get big. And I was slamming protein shakes, whey protein, all of it. And every time I'd slam my protein, man, it would just lock up and I'd get this stabbing pain in my chest where the cardiac sphincter it would just squeeze.
Yeah.
But because I was doing it so much, so frequently at that point, I got a significant increase in the swelling that didn't go back down. And so there was actually a time where, with a girlfriend at the time, I was out to eat. And if anybody's listening from up in Southeast Michigan, I don't know how far around this place goes, but it's called Olga's Kitchen. And it kind of had like soup, salads, things like that, some Greek food. And they had these things called snackers that were these like pita chip things with some seasoning on them. But then there was this Swiss cheese, kind of awesome, just stuff so good. This spread that you would put on them, and they came as a part of your meal. And so I was eating this
Yeah.
Swiss cheese spread, and then my salad had some cheese on it. And all of a sudden, what I would do was, if stuff kind of got stuck, I'd, drink some water, and it kind of like suck air in and force it down to squeeze things through if it was getting stuck. And it was just a
Yeah.
regular habit. Well, I tried to do that, and it didn't go down and I drank too much water and I inhaled it and coughed it
Mm.
up all over the table and then things were really stuck and I ran to the bathroom and like almost threw up and
Oh.
finally, I'm just standing there, arms above my head because that always seemed to help.
Yeah.
Things just calmed down and went through and you can just feel it just whoop, move right into your stomach. And I'm
Yep.
like, tears in my eyes, like, oh my gosh, I
Oh.
feel like I almost died. Um,
Wow.
Go back out to the table and there's like this couple who's probably our age now with their little kids that the guy was like, "Are you all right? I almost came in there after you, whatever." My girlfriend was freaking out, and
Mm.
my mom was like, time to figure out what's going on. And
Yep.
so a lady who she worked with at the time, her son he had a lot of other issues in addition to it, but he also had EOE. And so she had recommended, because they had been down the rabbit hole trying to figure out what was wrong with him.
Yeah.
Back at that time, it wasn't a widely taught condition in schools. And so there was a younger gastroenterologist that was about an hour away from our house, north of Detroit, that she was like, hey, you got to go see her because she actually knows what this is and knows what to do. And so we went to go see her, and thankfully she was more conservative with her treatment options, where basically the protocol was let's do an endoscopy, we'll do a tissue biopsy, we'll do some blood work, see what things pop up there. And so I had elevated eosinophils, which I continuously have those all the time to this day. I mean, they're like
Mhm.
6 or 7 when they should be
Oh
under
wow.
3, and so they're
Yeah.
always a little high. Um, but there's that part of it, the blood work, and then with the endoscopy and the tissue biopsy, there's a sliding scale of eosinophil density within the tissue that they'll measure from your esophagus. And also visually, you can tell. I mean, my esophagus, for those who are watching the video, it should be nice and wide open. Mine would look like, I mean, as bad as it sounds, like if you puckered your lips and you get all the creases and like almost no opening. That's what my esophagus looked like at the bottom where it should have been wide open.
Yeah.
And so she said, okay, usually what we do is oral steroids, um, plus a omeprazole or a proton pump inhibitor to reduce acid, and then avoid the 8 common allergens for 8 weeks. You know, uh, Tree nuts,
Dairy,
shellfish,
wheat.
dairy, gluten, eggs, all of the above. And I'm like, what am I going to eat? And so we
Yeah.
had a very strong inkling that it was dairy and it was gluten. And so we just totally 180. This was like honestly one of the biggest transitions that we had
Yeah.
for my family as a
Did,
whole.
Dr. Tim, did they do any food allergy testing, or they just said, "Hey, just avoid this"?
No, I mean, so like we talk about, she actually said there's not a wonderful correlation between um, that testing and finding the actual root issues because things are hypersensitive and you'll
Yeah.
react to a lot of stuff.
A lot of
And
stuff. Yeah.
so she was like, if you're confident that it's one of those 2 things, just avoid those. And so we let her know we were probably just going to lead those 2. And she's like, go for it. If you see things are getting better, great. If not, get rid of those. So we did that for 8 weeks, went in for another endoscopy. Esophagus was wide open, wide open. And so, yeah, that was kind of the goal was to obviously get things opened up. But then, it begs the question, well, which one was it? And so I started reincorporating some gluten again. That seemed to be okay. Dairy was really the thing that threw it off. And at that point, I started having some other like lower GI issues and things like that with dairy since my body kind of got used to not having it again.
Hmm.
And now since then, things have gotten to the point where nightshades plus dairy cause problems with that. And so I just avoid those for the most part. I'll have a little bit of nightshades because it's not as bad and it's more so just heartburn. And it can be regulated with taking quercetin and avoiding it for a while. But I mean, if I have even just a little bit of dairy, it's not a good time.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's been my experience. And
Yeah.
so through my understanding and my experience with how the testing tends to go, that gives me a little bit of insight towards when patients come in and they have conditions or even symptoms like that, what the medical treatment ends up looking like.
Hmm.
But also, in addition to that, patients also just tell me the same stories all the time. If they actually have been diagnosed with this condition, they're always like, yeah, it started with just, hey, take some omeprazole and we'll see if that helps by reducing acid. And then things get
Hmm.
worse. And so like, okay, well, it's not just that. Well,
Yeah.
let's do an endoscopy. Let's
Yeah.
see, let's see what we can come up with there. And then they're like, oh yeah, you got this massive swelling. And a lot of times what I hear, maybe it's because it's healthcare down here, which isn't quite as good as other places. Um, yeah, they just gave me steroids and they didn't really talk about foods with it. And so that tends to be kind of the norm that I hear now. It's, hey, take these steroids, take this PPI, and then you'll be okay. But it doesn't fix the problem. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's typically how the process ends up going. There's the blood work to figure out if there are eosinophils present, in high amounts in your blood, and then
Yeah.
from there, your endoscopy to visually inspect, but then
Yeah.
also biopsy the tissue to see what's going on. And then
Yeah.
from there, solution is reduced stomach acid, maybe some steroids to calm things down. You'll be good to go. So anyway, that's kind of how things tend to go with this condition. But Dr. Joel, in your experience, at least with that one patient you referenced,
Yeah.
I guess what was did they talk about what their medical diagnosis looked like and the solution and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I just pulled that up. Our first visit was a year ago. Um, Time flies, man. And for a little bit of background, so this gal was she's about 10 years old when I saw her, and basically, I'll just kind of read through some of the note a little bit. So issues began like 2 years prior. The stomach was hurting all the time. Started going to a GI doc. They diagnosed her with the EOE. Her main symptom was she would obviously the stomach pains, but she would like spit up all the time. And so basically, she would have to walk around and just like keep her mouth closed, like actively kind of squeeze her mouth closed. Otherwise, she felt like she was gonna spit up. And of course, you mentioned like things would get stuck. Food impaction, that's a big one. Difficulty swallowing, dysphagia is also a big thing that people run into with this. But for her, it was kind of mimicked more of the reflux symptoms of like, man, I just feel like something's kind of coming up and so forth. So um, I don't think I know they did endoscopy. I'm sure they did biopsy to get the diagnosis, just since that's the gold standard. I'm kind of trusting that, but I don't remember if I confirmed that for sure. But what was interesting as we jumped into this, and I talked, and we do free phone consults and all that fun stuff. But I talked, and it's like, I told the mom, I said, I don't see a lot of EOE. It's not something that's necessarily super common. I do agree with you, Dr. Tim, since a lot of people have symptoms like gastric reflux. I think there's probably a decent amount of people that's actually some low level of EOE that's kind of starting, and people probably don't catch that or see that. And so I think that's really helpful. I think that's really good that you said that. But I shared with her, this is at its core, this is an allergic condition. This is your immune system is reacting to something here. And so we talked about that. We talked about how that is related to the immune system, but it's also kind of rooted in the gut health. Her general kind of experience was very similar, as far as they recommended avoiding all those different foods, gluten, dairy, soy, eggs, fish, all the nuts, all the things. And at one point they're talking about taking allergy shots, like Dupixent shots and things like that,
Hmm.
and recommended. I think actually she was on Prilosec when she came in, and I always ask whenever people are on stuff like, "Hey, does that help you?" And it's a crazy question. It's not a crazy question, but it sounds like a crazy thing to ask. Like, "Hey, does that actually help you?" But so many people are put on stuff and they just stay on stuff, whether it's meds or supplements. And I'll ask them, "Hey, so how long have you been taking this? You've been taking it for 6 months? Okay." That's, I would say 3 to 4 weeks is more than enough time to be able to notice if something's like generally helping you or maybe not helping you or even making something worse. So I'm like, "Hey, does that help?" And she's like, "Not really." And it's like, okay. So obviously, Dr. Tim, we know some of the dangers of taking proton pump inhibitors and different antacids, as that can negatively impact digestion because you don't have enough stomach acid to digest food anymore. We've talked about that in our gastric reflux video, how the cardiac sphincter between the esophagus and stomach is really the dysfunctional area that causes acid to shoot up into the esophagus, and how the cardiac sphincter is usually a problem based on nervous system dysfunction and inflammation, infection, stuff like that. Well, nonetheless, we kind of jumped in. And Dr. Tim, is it okay if I kind of keep rolling through this, like into
Yeah.
what we found and all that
Yep.
good stuff? Okay.
Yeah, I've
So,
talked enough. Keep going.
okay. Okay. All right. So, and we can go wherever we want with this after here, but basically jumped in, and what I was doing with the muscle testing, that we do with each patient every visit, as I was testing through her nervous system, the first thing I was kind of testing was a couple of things. One, I was checking using the immunoglobulin E, um, basically the allergic part of your immune system, the eosinophil homeopathic. And so as I was using that and testing that, it made her system like hyper, like her muscles were weak, and it made her muscles respond in a hyper fashion. And then just kind of worked backwards on that. And interestingly enough, it went to her gut health. Now, I thought it was going to go to her immune system, stuff like that normally does, but it went to her gut health. And what I found in the gut health, this is something that I talk about a decent amount and I find a decent amount, but I found parasites. And so she tested for two herbs, black walnut and wormwood, also called artemisia. And she also tested as having some issues with H. pylori, a dairy sensitivity, and then some detox support, like with ammonia and stuff like that. So found all these different things related to the gut health, and then I think the next thing I found was like a toxicity with the Prilosec, and so she needed to kind of reduce that, and I think she had a zinc deficiency. So, anyways, long story short, that was visit one. We followed up about 3 weeks later, maybe 3.5 weeks, and this was how her system responded, Dr. Tim. I would say is definitely one of the more like rewarding sides of what we do, where people respond really, really well. Obviously, not every patient responds this way, but essentially, she came in. She said um, the spitting up, which she'd had for years at this point, had essentially gone away after the first week of taking the supplements. And then she, since then, had maybe spit up like at that point, maybe spit up like one time a week. And she maybe had like stomach aches like one time a week. I don't remember exactly how much they were before. I think they were, yeah, she was, it was a little bit better, but it would pop up every once in a while. But the spitting up went away, I mean, 99% almost, because she would have to hold her mouth closed all the time. And so, nonetheless, she responded super, super well based on what we found with muscle testing and how we address things. I think by our third visit, I'll check real quick here on some of these notes. By the third visit, I think she still had a little bit of spit up, like occasionally, maybe a few times a week. And then by our fourth visit, she didn't have any more spitting up or any tummy aches. And so, all that to say, I would love to say I'm a firm believer that people can heal from anything. I think the body is amazing. I think how God has created our body, it's a healing system. But she's, whether 100% gotten rid of it or not, you'd have to, go in, do a endoscopy again and biopsy and all that good stuff. But her life has changed significantly just from those things. And so, anyways, this story, Dr. Tim, was, as I kind of walked through this with them, was super encouraging. And I hope for our listeners, and I hope even maybe for you, Dr. Tim, I hope it's encouraging that, like, yeah, you can make massive improvements with this thing, and it's not something that you have to have the rest of your life. Dr. Tim, the last thing I'll mention, then we can kind of step into the next topic, whatever that may be there. As we were going through our first visit, one of the things I always ask is I say, hey, what would it take to make you feel healthy and happy? Like, what are our goals? And she said, she's kind of thinking, and I said, to get rid of these symptoms and get rid of the EOE that you're experiencing every single day. And she was like, this little 10-year-old girl, she's like, you can do that? Like, the doctor said I was always going to have this. And that broke my heart. That broke my heart because, I don't know, there's such a lack of, I think multiple things. I think belief that the body can heal from things, but I think number two, having actually a strategy and ability to kind of work to get to the bottom of things. So again, Dr. Tim, all of this, great story, great outcome. This doesn't happen for every person with EOE, but I do think it's possible. And I want to use that story to encourage people, because before that, I hadn't heard a lot of those testimonies. And I've heard testimonies, where people will see reduction in symptoms to where they, they feel a little bit better. But like by our fourth visit, which I think was maybe 2 or 3 months later, the spitting was totally gone. And I've checked in with him and seen him since, and she's still good. She's been doing great. Or a year later, and Super exciting and thankful for that. So, yeah, sorry, Dr. Tim, that was a little bit longer than I had hoped for. But
It's
any
okay.
thoughts, any question, any questions
Hey,
on
I did the
that?
same thing at first. It's okay. That's why we do this stuff. It's cases like that where you can just change somebody's life that make this really,
Yeah,
really great. Um, but yeah, that's awesome, especially with kids. Um, but I mean, here's the thing with this condition. If you deal with the underlying infections, if you deal with the byproducts of infections and improve overall GI health, things tend to go really good. However, if there is a food that's provoking things, a lot of times, if you continue to eat that food, I mean, obviously things are not going to get better. And so
right.
it does come with some pretty significant lifestyle changes where you have
Yeah,
to identify the trigger and eliminate it, take some natural antihistamines or some sort of immune system calming nutrients, maybe
yeah,
that support interleukin 10 or other things to relax that response. And then
yeah,
just kind of keep those in mind. For example, whenever I have patients with um, EOE, or even people that don't have a definitive diagnosis of EOE, but they have reflux, food gets stuck, they just avoid certain things because of how bad it is. And we find, say, like nightshades or dairy or something really provoking it, and we find quercetin or camu or vitamin A fixes their problem. As long as they understand, if you do eat this food, you are going to get a histamine response, you're going to have the eosinophils moving in, and you're going to need something to calm it back down. Resume taking that nutrient to calm things back down while staying away from that food moving forward. So you
yeah,
can you can have some things here and there. Of course, life happens. However, in my case, if I have nightshades, I got to take quercetin, or else I'll be miserable if I do it too
yeah,
much. If I have
yeah,
dairy, I need to take camu, or else I'll be
yeah,
miserable if I do too much. And so those, I mean, every single time it's a problem, those test. And so if, say you're at home, or say you're just not seeing a doctor, wherever you may be, say you're in your car sitting in traffic right now, it doesn't matter. Think of all the foods that you eat where you feel that those could be a problem. What do you eat a
yeah,
lot of? A lot of people are like, man, I love tomatoes. I eat
yeah,
nothing but tomatoes
yeah,
because you're doing too much. And you can argue about like the cyclic nature of eating that we used to have back when we didn't have access to grocery stores and produce from all over the world. We would eat, fresh tomatoes and stuff like that when they were in season, and then you'd stop, and then you'd have, your squash and your pumpkin and things like that that stored well for the winter. And then once springtime came, there'd be other stuff. And so you wouldn't eat the same foods all year round. And so some people argue that that is a big driver of food sensitivities and allergies these days because we're just flooded with things like solanines and other lectins and um, oxalates that are found in foods, and we just never get a break. So regardless, um, if you're constantly eating tomatoes, you're constantly eating dairy, and you notice that you always have a problem, make a very conscious effort to try to eliminate something and maybe try quercetin, maybe try camu, maybe try vitamin A. Those are probably the top three things that I'll see that help calm down this histamine response. And if you notice things are quite a bit better, well, keep doing it. But there are a lot of patients that, I guess back to the whole, I see a lot more people with this condition. I see a lot more people that explain to me symptoms of this condition.
mm-hmm.
I don't see an insane amount of people that have a definitive diagnosis of this.
Yeah,
And so I don't know if it is just, you go to your medical doctor, you say, stuff's kind of getting stuck. I kind of, burping, heartburn, kind of get stuff that comes up, feel like I'm gonna throw up a little bit. They're probably, honestly, most of the time when people come in with those symptoms and they don't have a diagnosis of it, they're on some sort of PPI. They're on Prilosec, they're on
yeah,
omeprazole, whatever you want to call it, brand name or
yeah,
generic. They're on some sort of acid reducer. And so that ends up being the first solution. And, then from there, it seems like a lot of the medical doctors around here, at least, just don't really go a whole lot further with it.
yeah,
But it ends up being the same solutions that fix it. It's eliminating those foods. It's calming that with natural antihistamines, and then from there, restoring stomach acid and restoring the gut lining. And so taking things like betaine hydrochloride, taking secretory IgA support nutrients like slippery elm, marshmallow, milk thistle, you name it, quercetin, those are all on the list. And at least with my practice and what I observe, I mean, we don't definitively diagnose anybody with just about anything. We are using the muscle testing to optimize nervous system function and investigate the nutrients required to fix these neurologic indications that we find with the nervous system. And so,
Yeah.
if you're looking for a definitive medical diagnosis, we don't necessarily do that. We end up being more of a last resort stop as opposed to, hey, diagnose me with something, where our philosophy is more, I don't necessarily care as much what a medical doctor would diagnose us with, but what I more so care about is what are we going to do about this to make you feel better and to fix this
Yeah.
problem, you know?
Yeah.
And if I see that somebody that has a diagnosis of EOE has the same symptoms as somebody who hasn't been diagnosed with it and the same things fix it, I would argue that's EOE.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And so I'll classify those as EOE symptoms. But all that being said, a big part that I wanted to get to today was kind of some demographic data and how much this has increased. So, a lot of our listeners, put on their tinfoil hats in preparation for this, where we get into conspiracy theories and block out all the 5G and all the stuff. It's funny, I say that ironically, but I'm sure there are problems that are caused by that stuff. I've seen it. Um, but there's, if there is some sort of trend with something, the question is why? Why is this
Yeah.
different? You know?
Yeah.
And so anyway, threw together some demographic data here and incident rates, all that stuff. So since 1980, so the average of all the data that I could compile, the average prevalence in the United States and Europe for eosinophilic esophagitis was about 1 per 50,000 people.
This was what year?
Today, guess what the number is today, Dr. Joel?
What was the year on that?
1980.
1981 and 50,000.
Yep.
And today, what is it? Is it 1 in 5,000?
It's about 1 in 1,000.
1 in
Yeah.
It's
So
increased 50 times in the last
it has increased
50
about
years.
50 times. That's a compilation of data and taking averages and all that stuff. Not gonna lie, I
Dang.
used ChatGPT to help me with this, kind of organizing it into a chart nicely. But the rest of the world, so this is kind of interesting, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this and where this could be tied together. I think some certain medical interventions might be involved here, but less than 1 per 50,000, maybe less than 1 per 100,000, somewhere around there is the entire world in 1980. So, and then from there, about 1 in 2,000 nowadays. So it's like 0.6
Wow.
per 1,000. So maybe a little less, like maybe 1 in 1,800 or something like that, whatever the math is on that. But
Right.
anyway, that being said, developed first world countries are experiencing this more. Countries that are more predominantly white are experiencing this more. And it's actually skewed 3 to 1, roughly speaking, men to women. And so white men are getting this more than any other demographic group. And so no wonder I have it. But it's way more common in whiter countries, developed countries, all that stuff. And so countries that are stricken with more poverty and that are more third world aren't experiencing as much. And so
Mm.
I have read some stuff and heard some people argue that it is due to vaccinations
I
and
was
genetic
wondering.
modulation that happens in the wake of that. So
Yeah.
um, just a thought, like I said, tinfoil hat kind of day. But what's different about that?
Yeah.
It's not like all of a sudden since 1980, white men have genetically changed drastically compared to the rest of the world. There
Yeah.
has to be something that's been exposed that's caused some sort of genetic modulation or genetic expression change in certain
Yeah.
groups or in certain areas or
Yeah.
countries since then.
Yeah.
So
No, that's good. And you also
thought
have
maybe it's
increased pesticides and glyphosates and all that. Not
yeah,
sorry to cut you off, but all those other
yeah,
additional factors too that
yeah.
I'm sure they all play an impact on things.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the whole epigenetics argument. The more
Yes.
garbage we are exposed to, the more that our bodies are going to express
Yeah.
undesirable genes. You know, so anyway, just a thought. So, but the thing is, I've had a ton of women that have this too. I mean, one of the most profound cases that I've had recently. I mean, the lady came in and That's if she's listening to this, she's gonna know I'm talking about her. She drove about 3 hours to get here, maybe a little bit more.
Mm.
But some one of her friends or somebody said, "Hey, you got to go see this guy." And she had been having joint pain for like just couldn't run or do anything for I think 2 years, something like that, where it just got really
Mm.
bad. And terrible heart. That was the reason she came in was the joint pain. And so I'm like, oh,
Mm.
this could be tough. Um, but then from there, we got into chatting and I looked at her blood work and I'm like, oh, eosinophils are like 6.8 or whatever it is. I don't remember exactly the number, but it was like over double what it should be. And I'm like, do you have heartburn, reflux, like any sort of upper GI issues? And she's like, oh, terrible. Oh my God, it's so bad. I avoid eating this because it gets stuck. I do this, I do that. And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, do you eat a lot of tomatoes? Do you eat a lot of dairy, this and that? She goes, oh, I love tomatoes. I eat so many
Yeah.
tomatoes. Got my garden and all this and all that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I know exactly what's going on here.
Yeah.
Ended up finding a primary night or histamine issue, nightshade issue, all that stuff, I think off of her stomach.
Yeah.
Gave her some sort, it was either quercetin or camu. And she came in 2 weeks later and was like, I'm like 95% better. And so we worked through a
Wow.
couple more things to get things nice and stabilized over the next couple
Amazing.
visits, make sure all things are good and staying good,
Yeah.
but completely transformed basically overnight
Awesome.
with avoiding those
Awesome.
things. And
Awesome.
but female, not male, so she was even unluckier, I guess. But once you fix this, I mean, if you have a significant like systemic allergic response where eosinophils are that high in the blood, I mean, it's no
Mm.
wonder you can have systemic symptoms, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, joint pains and all kinds of stuff. I mean, inflammation is just it's got to be through the roof.
Yeah. Interesting
So,
question, Dr. Before we kind of head towards wrapping up, I think we should share with patients like, hey, if you have these symptoms, if you maybe suspect this, what should you do? Just kind of a kind of simple, practical takeaway. But one question before that is, do you think people can get to the point where they can have dairy again and wheat, gluten again, and things like that, or do you think they need to avoid those for the rest of their lives?
here's I I'm all about optimism. I really am, but I think that there is reckless optimism sometimes where I don't want to push somebody over the edge
Yeah.
and give them advice that will push them back down a rabbit hole of problems. And
Yeah.
so even if that possibility is there, I always like to say, look, you say you can only tolerate, this histamine pool, okay? Say you can only calm your immune system so much, or say your immune system can only handle so much before it starts to overreact and hyperreact and just go crazy. As long as you keep things below that threshold by not eating things terribly frequently, and when you do have it, reincorporating those natural antihistamines that we worked through and calmed things down in the first place and got you back to normal, then you should be good. Now, given my own experience with this, I know there are cases where you can do everything you can to avoid stuff, and you are still going to have problems if you do have it. Maybe I need to be worked on by, you consistently or somebody to
Come on,
figure out
baby.
what sort of deeper things we got to do. Um, but I mean, I've got problems that have gotten worse over the years as I mean, I avoid things, so I'm doing fine. But if I don't avoid those, my reactions are worse than they were before. And so I don't know what else is going on there. I know my sister, who she's on the podcast before, she did genetic testing for methylation issues and she just failed just about everything. It was terrible.
Okay.
And we are both sensitive to caffeine. We're sensitive to a lot of things. And my whole family, we've got some problems. Hence why we both do this for work. But that being said, I think a lot of that has to do with it, where we just struggle to clear histamines, struggle with B vitamins and stuff like that, which are heavily involved with all that stuff. So, yeah, I don't know that. I think that answers your question. It's all a factor of each individual. You have to figure out what you can tolerate. We can get you back to baseline, but a huge part of what we do isn't just fixing your problems. Our goal is fix you, send you on your way, but also teach you how to identify your triggers and kind of take charge of your health. And so with this issue specifically, you know, if I say, stay away from nightshades, stay away from dairy, and this is your trigger, it needs to be understood that that could potentially cause issues again. And so you need to be aware of what ingredients are in things to make sure that if you are doing that and your symptoms come back, you know that's why. And you also need to recall, okay, well, this is the nutrient that we did to fix that. So let's just keep that on hand. Let's have that be in our individual medicine cabinet, on the back burner thing, so we can have it ready to go.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Um, Dr. Tim, I think that's good. I think in general, what I find is, I think if anyone's been listening to our podcast for a little bit, I love to simplify things. I love the details. I love getting nerdy with things, but also I think simplifying it is also a beautiful thing. And a lot of times I'll find that with allergic issues, yes, you have to calm the immune system. That helps a lot of the symptoms. But generally, what I find is if you actually heal the gut, which I'm going to say that again, I'm going to say it slowly. If you actually heal the gut, I say it like that because it's sometimes a difficult thing to do and can be very complex, and everybody's different. But if you actually heal the gut, if you can do it, again, very difficult thing, then I find that you can, over time, your immune system resets, and then you can have those foods again. But like you said, there's a lot of different complexities with each patient and each case and everything that's going on. So it's not always that simple when it comes to the everyday and working with every patient. But all right, Dr. Tim, any last kind of thoughts or comments if someone's kind of been dealing with some of these symptoms, they're worried about they might have this, like what would you recommend? Would you recommend they go see a specific doctor? Would you recommend they pursue testing for this? Would you recommend they just see a holistic doc to work to get to the bottom of things? What are some thoughts there that patients can kind of take away from this year?
So let's reflect real quick on how the process goes if you do go the medical route.
Yeah.
Blood work, endoscopy, tissue biopsy, PPIs, steroids, elimination diet. Okay, those are going to be the solutions that are presented to you. There may be others. I mean, we're not medical doctors, so that's what I have heard from patients. It's what I've encountered myself. That is what, I've found in my own research digging into it more for the sake of this episode and with patients. Okay.
And
so
Dr. Tim,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and all of that whole process is dedicated towards let's try to reduce the flare-ups. Let's try to reduce some of the symptoms, right? That's kind of the mindset.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
And then keep going here.
Correct. So if your goal is fix this problem and keep it good, you need to figure out how to actually calm the immune system down and keep it calm and support interleukin 10 and all these immune system cytokines that calm things. Okay. And so I would encourage you go find, even if, I know we do systems healthcare and there's all the docs in the systems healthcare website. We're kind of black sheep in a way, or unicorns, some sort of rare, animal, mythical or not, in that we're not all over the place. I mean, I think I counted there's less than 20 of us on the SHC website at this point. And so those that are certified in the exact technique that we do, if there's somebody near you, great, go see them. They will absolutely help you quickly. However, find somebody who does applied kinesiology, but also doesn't just adjust things. So find somebody who does AK that has some sort of functional medicine or nutrition knowledge so they can actually help you figure out if there are big problems going on, get that fixed. I would argue with this condition, biofeedback mechanisms are going to be the absolute best way to solve this. And by biofeedback, I mean muscle testing with nutrition testing. Find somebody who does that. There are, just traditional functional medicine practitioners that I'm sure could help you with it. But this condition does not need to be terribly complex or expensive to treat. If you go traditional functional medicine route, where there's just a ton of labs, no muscle testing, a lot of times they're going to sell you on a year-long package where you get, work with this health coach, you're going to work with this person who's, a gut healing specialist with probiotics, and you're going to do this with a doctor once, and you're going to do this. And it's a whole lot of outsourcing, I think, for the sake of making it look like a more cohesive process, when really you need to spend time with the doctor. They need to figure out what's wrong with you. They need to educate you and then help you develop a plan moving forward with diet and then proper supplements to fix this. But say you don't even go to a doctor. Food journal, period. Start eliminating some things. Honestly, the biggest things that we'll see, dairy, nightshades, gluten, eggs. Get rid of those 4 things, maybe even just one at a time, and take quercetin, camu, vitamin A. If you cover your bases with all that stuff, and that's what's driving it, that will absolutely get better. to some degree. Now, if there is infection or byproducts of infections or histamine clearance issues, that can be a little more difficult, but that's where at that point you have to go see somebody. That's hard enough for us to help people with in the office where we don't have definitive answers unless we get hands-on and check things, to where it's not quite as straightforward as just stop these foods, take these broad nutrients, but track your own symptoms. I say this all the time. Be your best health advocate by
Yeah.
problem solving. Treat yourself like a detective, put your detective
Yeah.
hat on. Gather data, create a plan.
Yeah. That's
And that's your best
awesome.
bet. So,
That's awesome. Dr. Tim, I don't think there's anything to add to that. That's great. I love it. I love it.
mic
Um,
drop. All done.
Mic drop. Mic drop. Wireless mic drop. All right,
Yeah.
let's all right, let's wrap up here. For our listeners, we hope that this has been helpful for you. If you guys have any questions or thoughts on this condition, or if there's another topic you want us to cover, reach out to us, let us know. For me, the practice here is called Freedom Health and Wellness here in Flower Mound, Texas. You can find me online at drjoelmiller.com. You can find me on Instagram. Yeah, if you guys have any questions or need anything, feel free to reach out to our office and we'd be happy to help in whatever way that looks.
Yeah, great. I'm Dr. Tim Augustiniak here at Flourish Functional Wellness Center in Bentonville, Arkansas. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out. All the contact info is on the homepage of our website. It's flourishfwc.com. Links to all the socials, contact info, office location, you name it. All those things are on there. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Hopefully this was a good one for you, and we will see you in the next one.